Today's panel will explore how artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming industries, economies, and societies. China and the United States lead in AI innovation, each with unique approaches and global implications. This competition is technological, geopolitical, and economic, affecting AI's development and governance worldwide. For the global majority, also known as the Global South, it brings opportunities and challenges, while dominance by either nation raises concerns about dependency and data sovereignty. Before we introduce our expert speakers, Rohana will outline some housekeeping rules for the session. Hello, Rohana.
Hi, Priya, and welcome everyone. Before we dive in, let me quickly run through some Zoom tips to help us have a great session together. This will be a 1-hour discussion. There will be 30 minutes allotted for each panelist, 10 minutes each, followed by a 10-minute conversation between the panelists. The last 15 minutes are allocated to the audience for their questions. Please be aware that this session is being recorded. By participating, you consent to being recorded. All attendees will be muted throughout the presentation. Only the speakers and the hosts will have their videos on. Attendees can keep their videos off or on. Please use the chat box to submit questions. We will address them during the Q&A session at the end. We recommend using Speaker View for the best experience. This recording will be submitted to various social media outlets. It will be free of charge and for educational purposes only.
Thank you, Rohana. I am delighted to introduce our first speaker today. He is Mr. Chakradhar Chekuri. Chuck is currently a fellow at the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in D.C., Washington, D.C. His presentation today will draw from his extensive experience across government, defense, and healthcare sectors. He'll share perspectives on responsible AI deployment and risk management. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you, Priya. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, Rohana, and thank you for the panelists. So today I'll be so do I share my screen, Priya? Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Awesome. So today I'm going to talk about the implications of innovation, right? We talk about innovation, and what I want to cover today is three things. We start with what is the trigger for this conversation? Why are we having this conversation? And then I'm going to delve into the landscape, how I see AI as a big picture, because AI is such a huge monolith. That's how it's seen as. And then we talk about the nature of this AI race and what its impact will be. Then I'll close with a few takeaways. So why does it matter, right? And it's a big flashpoint. The way I see it is last week, DeepSeek shocked everybody. It was like a bombshell, right? It came with better tech and at a lower cost. It pretty much wiped out $1 trillion out of the things. And according to me, it's not a coincidence. It had to happen. And it's been rewriting the rules of the game, right? That's a shocker. And I think we have to talk about it. And then the other interesting thing that happened is when I was at HUD until January 20th of this year, we were working on how to make AI safe, how to manage risk, how to promote equality, those kind of things we were working on. But then the current administration came, took out all the new executive orders, and then they asked us to focus on opportunities rather than risk. So the whole policy flip, like everybody's talking about more opportunities. And we always think as like US, China, and these are the two things, but I think global players are stepping up. We just saw a France and India AI summit, right? And then there are other nations joining the race. Everyone wants it. And then this is like an inflection point in the AI trajectory. So we must talk, we must understand, and we must be prepared. And I think, again, thank you guys for setting this up. It's the right time to have this kind of conversation. Now, when we talk about AI gets hyped to death, right? And every time I sit down with people and try to write a policy paper, AI is like, what is AI? Is it predictive? Is it probability? There's like so much discussion that goes on even before getting into any detail. So what I came up with, and I've been using it, is a framework for really understanding decoding AI. That's what I call. And I actually have published it on the framework.axiomatic.info.com. So the way I see it as there is a technology aspect of AI, and then there is an application aspect of AI. Right? On the technology aspect of it is how do we teach, and then how do we use the models. On the right side, now AI is going to impact the world, and it's going to change our physical world and it's going to change our digital world. So how does this thing, if we can break it down, then we can see, like for training, so for example, the costs are very high. You need really high skills. Innovation also, it's like a really area of a lot of innovation, and it has a lot of technical challenges, the way the models are constructed. And on the inference side, we are thinking about how do you put them together? What is the agents? What are mixing, fine tuning? There's a lot of tech also on the other side of it, right? So there's that one. And then on the application side, when we talk about digital, we're talking about ethical concerns, business workflows, governance, how it's going to change our work environment, automation. Now, on the physical side, we're talking about autonomous vehicles, robotics, warfare. So there's a lot of innovation. So we really have to see where the strengths and weaknesses of different players are and how they are, because they're not all monolithic. If we really want to get in, we need to dig deep in. So this kind of a split is not just academic. I think it's a key to innovation, ethics, and power, right? If you master this foundation, you'll be able to get through this. So now we kind of have the landscape laid out. Let's look at what drives innovation, right? So all countries, basically, if you look at it, we say race and who's going to dominate and who's going to win. At the end of the day, all countries want to give their people a good life. They all want their population to have better lives, more jobs, more productivity, and they all think AI is their ticket, and that's where the problem. They all want to win. They're all bullish, right? But that's good. But then how are they going to innovate? So we are not really talking about who is going to win the whole AI race. We are talking about who is going to innovate faster, because we are in that phase of AI where innovation is the driver right now. Whoever innovates more will be the leaders, right? And everybody's vying for that. So let's talk about how we understand innovation. So high risk capital and more STEM graduates on the left side. Those, if you have those high, you're pushing innovation. If you have, so risk capital gives you a short-term advantage in innovation, while STEM graduates gives you a long-term advantage in innovation, right? A high median age and more regulation, they constrain your innovation. So if you have high regulation, uh, that's a more immediate constraint on innovation, right? And if you have, low median age or high median age, it's a long-term constraint, right? You want low median. So if you see how these countries are laid out, you can really see why China and US are the biggest GDP countries. So they have more money, so they can invest more. But also they have the biggest advantage. If you see, US has the major advantage right now. They have the most risk capital. And China has a long-term advantage because they have more STEM graduates, right? But Europe and India, their GDPs are not that big. So if they team up, they can be a viable player, and they are teaming up, right? So India and France combined, I think they can make a very strong contender. And if you talk about other countries like Japan and Germany, they're not in the general AI race, but they're more in um, automation. They're more industrially big. So you'll see a lot of innovation coming from them. So don't rule them out. So they'll show up on big robotics or automation or industrial. That is where they're playing to their strengths. So that is where the geopolitical chessboard is to understand innovation and how they play out. So let's talk about what is the impact, right? So there's a lot of impacts, and I think what does it mean for the global areas, right? Impact, I believe, is will be widespread and varied, right? But what is driving this impact? It is three fundamental drivers. Like the world feels unchained because it's not the privileged few who can have access to amazing technology, right? And the less regulations, it feels unchained, less regulation. That means it will be rapid progress in impact, and there will be new areas of innovation we haven't even thought of yet, right? And then it will take time for uh, everyone to be on the same page because it's unchained, and to bring everybody on the same page, it will take longer, right? And then the countries are so going to the second driver. It's like everybody's going to a nation first. China has always been kind of a nation first because of their political. Even US is now saying America first, and then India is always like make in India. This those kind of things, right? Self-reliance, particularly after COVID, with supply chains breaking down, and everybody wants a lot of the production coming in. So, and then the US is also going for a smaller government. What smaller government means, federal is not going to spend a lot of money, so most of the money is going to the states. So there will be more money, including AI, will come to the states. So there will be more projects. So it will really spark local innovation, regional innovation, and national innovation hubs. So those are the things that I think that is the kind of impact this kind of is going to cause us. So investment. The reason because everybody thinks AI is the ticket, and that's what everybody believes. So the money is real, and we are spending a lot of money. And then even schools are starting new courses, and everybody's talking about new things. So this impact is not going to be short term; it's going to be long term, right? So with that said, what do we take away from this, right? Uh, so I think we have to be responsible with our innovation, and the flashpoints, we just started with one flashpoint. There will be more flashpoints, like there will be quantum computing, there will be AGI, and there will be a lot of other disruptors. There will be many more. And we need to be talking about every flashpoint, what happens. And this is about a 10 to 15 year span. It's not just today, it's just innovation is starting. And then the AI landscape is not monolithic, right? And it needs to be decoded like I was doing in my framework. Use some same sensible framework, and each one will be going up, and each one with its own flashpoints along the way. And I like to do this kind of a graphs to help me. I'm a data guy, so I want like these charts so that you can actually see the different types of behaviors for different things. So then the race, if you get to the race, yes, everybody will have an increment. They're all starting at different points, but they'll all show little bit increments, but they'll all end up in the same place eventually, right? It'll be nail biting for the spectators and participants. I mean, it's who's going ahead, who's coming back, who's going to be next. So it's going to be very exciting, right? But the way to go about it is responsible, making sure we understand the flashpoints, making sure we understand the landscape, paying attention to this. So responsible innovation is being aware, staying current, and being on your feet for the next 25 years. That means having the right partners. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chuck, for your insightful presentation. So now we're moving on to our second speaker. He's Heramb Podar. Heramb is a final year student at IIT Roorkee who is focused on governance and safety of foundation AI models, particularly in mitigating misuse risks. Heramb leads the India chapter of Encode, which is the largest youth movement focused on tackling emerging technological risks. He is a current policy research group member at the Center of AI and Digital Policy. Welcome, Heramb.
Hello, I'll just try to share my screen really quickly.
Yeah.
You see my screen?
Yeah, you can see
Give
his
me
screen.
1 second. Okay. Is it coming up as full screen?
We can see
Not yet.
not the full screen, but just the PowerPoint. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Hopefully there'll not be too much of a lag. Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I think this is a very important discussion regarding, there's these two poles of China and the US. Often we kind of miss that there's a whole set of nations, today a global majority, which is just does not get a spotlight in the AI conversation. And ironically enough, it is the one which is going to be most affected by it. So continuing from where my previous speaker left off, and he set the stage very beautifully. Thank you, Chuck. Um, I'm going to be talking about specifically the impact of AI in the global warfare space. So everyone knows that the first war was about 2,000, 3,000 years ago, at least the first recorded war. The last war is, unfortunately, it's kind of still going on. Uh, we see that every death so far has been a human decision. Every pull of a trigger, every missile which is being fired, if there's anti-personnel mine which is being laid, that is being laid by humans. So there is some degree of like intentionality and authority which humans have had. And this brings us to the advent of this new military hardware called autonomous weapon systems. I'll be referring to them as AWS since autonomous weapon systems is quite a mouthful. Um, and the whole point of this is like AI, as the AI race is like getting more and more fast paced. It is getting, the stakes are getting higher, as my previous speaker highlighted. It's finding applications in all of these different domains, with obviously military being one of them. But what exactly are autonomous weapon systems? The definition we are choosing to run with today, and there is a lot of debate at the UN regarding what is an autonomous weapon system and what is not, which is systems that select, engage, and execute missions without explicit human supervision. This is sometimes touted to be the third big revolution in arms warfare after the advent of gunpowder and nuclear weapons. It is So this is like how a current autonomous weapon system could function. There's usually like attack drones which are quite the fired in conflicts like Gaza and the conflicts in Ukraine, which transmit off video streams to a mothership drone which is flying much farther up in the air. Um, that might be communicating with Starlink or other network frequencies, and retranslating them back to the headquarters, so command and control headquarters, where an AI data center would process whatever is happening on the battlefield and could guide the attack drones. So it's much more easier for me to kind of get us all on the same page by talking about some of the myths to get them out of the way. So myth number one is people immediately jump to drones. Even I just showed you an example of a drone system. So AWS focuses much more on capabilities. It's not really as much hardware. These can be tanks. India has a project called the Muntar tank system, where you have automated target selection. You have drones. So these can be like various kinds of drones which are being manufactured by the US, by China, by other major arms players across the world. They can be unmanned submarine vehicles. I'll be talking a little bit about them as well. It can also be integration of AI into these nuclear command chain to flag, missiles that are flying into your territory as being potentially harmful, and then automatically retaliating. This last point is very interesting because there's something called a list of nuclear close shave incidents, and humanity has come way too close, way too often to very certain nuclear war, because very often because computer systems flag clouds in the sky, flag birds in the sky as being a missile which is incoming. And so far, thankfully, during the Cold War, there had been humans which were sitting on these systems and were going, no, this is probably not right. Our enemies won't fire one missile at a time, something like that. And that has kept us away from this, nuclear winter, nuclear annihilation. So human control and human rational behavior has been what has been keeping us away from this so far. So another myth is, oh, but AI is can do much better in warfare than humans. Humans are imperfect. Humans are lazy. Humans don't work 24 times 7. Um, the problem with this is, how exactly you are defining accuracy is a really big question. Are you defining it by the number of strikes you carried out? If you are, then we definitely don't want a world where we have more strikes. We want a world where we have less strikes. In fact, even military doctrines and people in the army would want to have smaller number of much more targeted, localized strikes. You would want to properly define missions, but humans are notoriously bad at doing this. Just as a quick example of goal misgeneralization, which happens in any AI systems, but can happen in these AI systems incorporated into weapon hardware, which is that you might ask a drone system or a monitoring system to track any large movements of vehicles or people from a conflict region. The idea being, very naturally, you want to track the convoy of ammunitions, arms, soldier movements, and so on. The issue is that refugees are also falling into this bucket, which might be trying to escape from this conflict zone, and a system might flag such a problem, such a mass exodus of refugees. There's obviously a lot of problems with data sets. Just like I was mentioning earlier with refugees, typically military personnel label these data sets as being combatants and non-combatants. And the other issue is military data is almost always one-sided. You never get data from the other side of the war. Uh, Data is broken, it's fragmented. Data collection practices in conflict zones aren't exactly the best. And we are going ahead and training these AI systems on such broken, fragmented data. Here's another myth. We can just program whatever humanitarian law, whatever ethics we want into these systems. Everything will be great, right? In war, unfortunately, truth is always up for debate. Just like I was talking about earlier, data is very fragmented. We don't really know who shot the first bullet, what exactly happened. Um, IHL requires a lot of judgment. Often humans with human values and human intentions and an understanding of context in the broader world and what we value as human beings. Um, but robots don't pick that up really well. AI systems are notoriously hard to align to human values. This is something called the AI alignment problem. And this is not something which is reducible to a simple matrix. This is not something which is writable into like a if-else loop in a code. Precision guided does not mean precision morality. Like these AIs are very imperfect and often they are like black boxes. Our understanding of these inner workings of these systems are at best GPT-2 level right now. And that means that after a decision is carried out, it might take us a long time to understand why exactly something happened. And as these systems process like terabytes, if not exabytes of data, it is really hard for human beings to keep playing this game of catch up with an AI system. So like I was talking about earlier, AI can't learn ethics from the data, which is already broken and not even ethical. Okay, I am not sure if this will work, but hopefully this will. This is a set of Chinese war dogs which have been deployed and they are undergoing testing. So this they can have you can mount machine guns on their back. They can put forward um, you know have detection systems of what kind of troop movements are happening. They can respond accordingly. In a game between humans and AI, you can guess who will respond quicker. So this is like seemingly the future of warfare for us. Just quickly moving on. Okay, coming quickly to the United States and what it is doing. A very brief overlook in terms of autonomous weapon systems. Interestingly, it is doing these joint programs with other NATO countries to develop these things called collaborative combat aircraft. It's kind of like more advanced version of drones which can take off from aircraft carriers. They can autonomously locate and detect movements. They can carry out observation missions. The US has actually earmarked a lot of money recently for the development of drone systems, for development of autonomous and other military AI innovations for national security. It has made a task force on naval drones, somewhat similar, but mostly underwater or tracking movements across maritime boundaries, making sure that whose nuclear submarines are where and how we can respond to them, how we can deter their movements, so on and so forth. And very interestingly, recently there's this report from CSIS, which talked about how they're trying to make autonomous Boeing and Lockheed Martin and all these big aircraft manufacturers are trying to make these autonomous aircraft. The idea being that if you take a human pilot outside the aircraft, you don't really need the life support system, the seats, the human control interface. So that saves you money. That also saves you real estate on the aircraft, which is really crucial in terms of weight. And that has implications for how fast the aircraft can fly. The idea here is essentially that um, so far, Western military tech has been getting more and more expensive. If you take out some of these things and you make these automated fleets of aircrafts, maybe they can coordinate amongst themselves. And this could be like a much more cheaper, economically friendly alternative for countries to go to war with each other. Um, a quick spotlight for those who are uninitiated about this. Anduril has recently signed contracts with OpenAI to integrate their AI models. Again, very vaguely worded for matters of national security and ongoing issues. Um, Palantir has recently signed an investment agreement with Anthropic, very similarly worded for national security issues. And Google has recently dropped its commitment on not using AI for mass surveillance and in AI for arms. Okay, quickly shifting gears to China. Uh, I just showed you the robot wolf, which is the QUGV robot wolf. China is also doing a lot of AI-enabled submarines. Thought process here is most scholars say the thought process here is to keep track of what is happening in the South China Sea, and to be able to build like this web of deterrent submarines around islands which they claim to expand their sphere of influence. And the spotlight here is on a digital Silk Road. So China has a lot of influence amongst certain African countries, Middle Eastern countries, and they have a history of being a very reliable source of cheaper military tech. So we saw recently that the wing loon drones were sold to Libya. There have been reports of sales of CH-4 drones as well to certain Middle Eastern countries. So like this is not just a war between or like other sort of AI cold war between the US and China. It's also a matter of competing for who can get more checks from people from countries in the global south. Okay, coming back to like the global majority, where does this effectively leave us, right? So we saw at the UN recently there was a vote about 4 or 5 months back now on having more negotiations, on having some sort of work towards an international agreement and legally binding instrument on autonomous weapon systems. 166 countries have voted in favor. 120 plus countries have um, expressed their support for a legally binding instrument. We recently also saw at the Paris Action Summit. There was a side event where there was a declaration on AI and autonomous weapons, which 26 countries signed on to, including NATO countries, which was a good sign. The US and UK and France were not on the signatories list. So the Secretary General of the UN has also called for a treaty on autonomous weapon systems. And this is a global south issue because 87% of all conflict happens across the global south. So it's like these global north countries and companies churning out these high-tech weapons and then just exporting them to conflict zones across the global majority countries. So this kind of leaves us that there's a potential for escalation in war. War can become much more asymmetric. It can become much more unpredictable. Um, there are chances of like military flash crash. So there's already instances of robots fighting robots in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. What this might lead to is, for people who are aware of like a financial flash crash, when two like AI systems kind of compete against each other, they might try to drive prices down to a really all-time low. Similarly, if an AI system kind of if two sets of AI systems just detect that they are all waging out war, it might trigger a kind of chain reaction across the respective battlefields. Notably, there's global majority countries have weaker institutions, so there's a very large potential for non-state actor proliferation. FPV drones cost $500. If like you have open source models like Llama, which by the way there are already reports of the Chinese military integrating Llama into their autonomous weapon systems. So if these things become like virtually free, it's like $500 to $1,000 to get like an autonomous weapon system. Think how much havoc that could cause. And smaller nations might feel compelled to catch on to this train of um, getting more shiny, more capable military tech, which ultimately takes away from um, regional stability, peace. It also takes away from government's budgets to allocate to other social programs and so on and so forth. Okay, simple call to action. We have Encode, which is the largest youth organization focusing on AI risks for securing my generation's future. It's also a part of the Stop Killer Robots Coalition. It's a coalition of about 270 member organizations across the world. We are all aimed at getting us an international treaty on autonomous weapon systems. And with that, I bring it to a close. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Heramb. That was a little bit, scary. That was it brings us to a point where we need to really look at all these AI capabilities. And as Chuck said, ethics and governance is so important. Our next and last speaker for today is Nakshatra Suresh. She is a cyber criminologist, academic, and public speaker who is one of the leading young voices in digital technology and artificial intelligence safety in Australia. She will bring a social science and criminological perspective to all industries and works across academia and the not-for-profit sector to advance the responsible technology movement. Welcome, Nakshatra. Muted. Nakshatra, your audio is muted. Can you hear me?
Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, awesome. It just didn't let me unmute myself there, but thank you so much for the introduction. And I just want to shout out both of you, Priya and Rana, at the Zero Day Dispatch team for facilitating these awesome discussions, as well as my fellow panelists, Chuck and Heramb, for their contributions to the dialogue today. Before I start, I do want to acknowledge the traditional owners on the land on which I meet you today. For me, it is the Darug people of the Eora Nation on whose lands I live and work. I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that to anyone who has joined us at the dialogue today. I also want to note that the opinions and views that I express here today are not reflective of any previous or current employer that I have had and are strictly my own. They're purely observations that I have gained through my research and insights. So my take on this dialogue is slightly different. I thought I would bring a different lens and discuss Australia innovation and the global AI race. Something that is interesting. I'm joining, it's 2:40 a.m. here right now. So I've literally got some sleep in the eyelids, but I'm really excited about this topic. So you might be wondering how this is relevant to the US and China, but the reason I threw my hat in the ring for this discussion is that across the world, like-minded countries such as Australia are feeling the effects of the global AI race. So in my work, I regularly see the topic of digital trust emerging, especially in the context of how we, as users of newer forms of technology, should be given the tools and the resources to understand and trust what we are being exposed to. So issues such as political and economic challenges emerge in our populations, which is often a trickle-down effect, and we can see from a social perspective how this affects our daily lives, including the way that we might perceive others. So overall, I thought, what might this competition between China and the US mean for countries like Australia? For a little bit of context, Australia ranks a bit poorly when it comes to innovation. Around 1.7% of our GDP is invested in research and development, which is significantly lower than the OECD and other major countries like the US. While we do have a culture of innovation and gain an exorbitant money through trade, we are quite lacking on homegrown success. A significant number of Australia's innovation has also been recently found to be driven by artificial intelligence. So 68% of Australian businesses have implemented AI, which is strongly supported by the fact that 7 in 10 startups are either pioneering or using AI on a daily basis. Majority of these industries that support this change belong to health, financial services, education, enterprise solutions, and climate tech as well. However, there is a large skills and adoption gap across the board, as well as investment lacking, which means that the uptake of AI is an uphill battle. So perhaps this is why our digital regulations and laws here in Australia, like many other countries, have been outpaced by advancements in technologies. This is also why we currently do not have and are not considering having an independent AI safety institute or AI acts that we've seen in other countries. What we currently do have is a set of proposed voluntary guardrails that aims to provide practical guidance to all Australian organisations on how to safely and responsibly use and innovate with AI. The primary issue with these guardrails is that the fact that they are not mandatory and that the ethical and responsible aspect of AI scares founders a little bit when it comes to compliance. Personally, I've been in the startup space for almost 2 years now, and I can safely say that most of the founders and innovators that I meet are using AI. So to quote an investor from the State of the Australian Startup Funding Report in 2024, we saw a more balanced approach, tempering enthusiasm with caution. Now the bar has been raised. Being AI first is no longer enough. With AI becoming central to most modern tech stacks, investors will look to scrutinize a company's competitive edge. Another interesting fact is that Australian founders are always trying to break into the US market as they see potential in advancing and growing there. In casual conversations that I have had, places like Silicon Valley and New York are now dream locations for founders in Australia. Whether it's to learn more about how to use AI in their daily lives or how to expand their agents to include demographics outside of Australia, our founders are looking to other countries like the US for support and investment. Really quickly, I'd like to touch on Australia's current relationship with both of the global superpowers. Historically, Australia has had a really close relationship with the US, especially given that they are part of the Five Eyes, along with Canada, New Zealand, and the United Kingdom. Often you will find that Australia sides with these countries as their security and intelligence is over 75 years strong, and that relationship that they've maintained that agreement means that they will side with those countries. At the governmental level, relations between Australia and the United States are the strongest and are formalised by the ANZUS Treaty, the AU-KUS Security Partnership, and the Australia-United States Free Trade Agreement. We also have our own visa option, the E3, which sets us apart from other foreign applicants, which means that they usually have to apply for a H-1B visa. You will find that the US primarily collaborates with Australia on military and defense-related projects with artificial intelligence capabilities and partnerships. There are a number of security dialogues with other like-minded countries that encourage innovation in this space, including Japan, which they also capitalize on investment in universities here and research centers here in Australia that encourage new, fresh ideas that capitalize on newer technologies. Australia generally looks at the US for guidance, protection, and support because we are literally an island in the middle of nowhere, and we are often led by what happens on American soil. Australia's relationship with China is interesting. Aside from the geopolitical tensions that exist in the Asia-Pacific region, historically both countries have maintained quite a steady and neutral relationship. China is also Australia's strongest and largest two-way trading partner, accounting for 26% of our goods and services trade in the world in 2023 to 2024 through the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement. China is also the fifth largest foreign direct investor in Australia. The Chinese population in Australia is about 5.5%, which is over 1.4 million people, and according to the Lowy Institute, majority do believe Australia is a great place to live. Chinese students, who make up about 22% of the international student population in Australia, continue to choose the universities in this country for their education. Australia is a very multicultural country, but after COVID-19, the rates of racism increased exponentially for the Asian population. In one state survey, 40% of participants faced racism during the pandemic, which was fueled by tensions between the countries as well as the media. Now let's compare a little bit. Australia adheres to the One China policy, but has also raised a number of human rights issues with the country, which it doesn't do the same with the US. In 2018, China and the US entered a trade war. In 2020, Australia followed with a call for inquiry into the origins of COVID-19. In both situations, the US and Australia faced economic sanctions by China, but Australia was more successful as businesses found alternative markets to approach. Now let's bring it back all to AI. Digital trust, for those who are unfamiliar, refers to the confidence that users have in the ability of people, technology, and processes to create a secure digital world. Often, this is informed by the companies themselves with transparency reports, but they're also informed by the government's stance on particular companies. China's DeepSeek was banned from all federal governments and devices in Australia through a mandatory direction under the Protective Security Policy Framework to prevent access, use, or installation of its products. Under a Freedom of Information request by a popular media outlet in Australia, the government disclosed that DeepSeek posed an unacceptable risk to the Australian government's technology state, citing issues of privacy and storage of data. In fact, this was translated down to certain universities, as well as large telecommunication and media providers, including Encode, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, and Australia Post. While there has been no data in relation to the effects of DeepSeek on community populations, there is enough to assume that the anti-Chinese sentiment is reinforced through these mandatory measures, which means very low digital trust. The US's OpenAI, very different take. In fact, the Australian government has only released interim guidance on how to adopt ChatGPT and Microsoft's Copilot, with suggestions to government agencies exercising discretion when interacting with generative AI tools. This guidance is also mandatory, but uses very vague terms and instructions. While this doesn't necessarily reduce digital trust, it does reinforce that the government is okay with the usage of these tools. The same citation from the Australian government used to ban DeepSeek, which is quoted as, "Beyond government applications, generative AIs like DeepSeek pose additional risks to the public. These include the potential spread of misinformation, unintentional biases in outputs, and the risk of privacy breaches if personal data is inadvertently exposed or misused." Now I ask you this. Do you think that exact quote that they used to ban DeepSeek can also be applied to ChatGPT? I'm very interested to see how competition on a global scale informs the way Australia perceives innovation and the adoption of the ethical and responsible adoption of AI. From where I stand, the steps Australia takes in the next couple of years will be integral to its strategic positioning on the map. Thank you for the opportunity to contribute. I'm happy to take questions after or on notice if I'm unable to answer now.
Thank you so much, Nakshatra, and thank you everyone for such wonderful insights and like wonderful conversation that we've had with so much of information that's out there that you have helped to like spread today. So in that lens, I would love to open the floor for all the panelists for like the questions that they would want to ask each other after like hearing such wonderful insights we've had from all three of you. So I always say this is like the favorite part of this dialogue session. So I'm leaving the floor open. Yes, Chuck, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. I think both of you, I really liked. I was very informative. Nakshatra, I was really learned a lot about Australia. I'm going to answer your question about ChatGPT, but Heramb, I was really fascinated with the alarmist take on it. But there is a point I want to make. You make a very good point about human conflict. Particularly, it is more in the global south, right? Where the developed countries have less of a conflict. I think my take on that is I'm not an alarmist. I know there are people, human beings are killing each other for a long time. But my hope is if AI really gives the benefit it gives to the global south as much as it did to the development, then the conflict will go there down too, based on what you said. So that's my observation there. And Shresh, Nakshatra, quick question for you is like, yes, ChatGPT is as guilty of using or not as ethical as DeepSeek. I think the reason governments do that is because if DeepSeek misuses my data, I have no recourse. If ChatGPT misuses my data, there is a strong government. We're transparent about it. So that's why I think that you see that difference. And thank you both for a very insightful talks.
Nakshatra, would you like to respond to that first?
Yes. Thank you, Chuck, and I really appreciate your feedback on what we've discussed. And I definitely agree. There's more security in the way that Australia perceives the US, which is why I say that there are these like anti-Chinese sentiments that are there. And that's with anything. Like if you look at majority of the intelligence that they collect, it's about like Asian countries and the threat that they pose, right? And it's because they have such a strong Five Eyes network with all the other countries where they are constantly mapping the threat landscape and looking at these countries that they probably wouldn't trust any products that come out of any of these countries that are on a list of again the countries that they wouldn't trust. So yes, I do agree, but I just thought it was ironic that the reason that they quoted for DeepSeek is literally the same issues that we see in ChatGPT. And obviously, they can't disclose the entire reason for it. It's just, it seems a bit ironic that the reasons that they used is something that you can also apply for ChatGPT.
Yeah, very quickly, I'm not sure I understood Chuck's point fully. Like, I think, with DeepSeek, it has given a lot of hope to countries like India and other relatively well-resourced global south countries to take on the mantle of, putting on AI. But the question is, it's one thing to like, you know, build your own AI model. It's another thing to be able to integrate it well into hardware and to have the funding and to have the capabilities to do that. Plus, like, you know, these models we are like mostly talking about regarding ChatGPT, regarding DeepSeek, they are LLMs, right? Uh, and obviously, Palantir and Duran are not buying away LLMs from these guys. They are buying the underlying structure, underlying tacit knowledge they have to build like better image recognition systems and so on, right? Um, so it seems like there's a very clear access of certain countries who make all of these weapons and at the forefront. Um, and I think there might be like smaller players who might do their part. Like India is trying really really hard right now to make more weapon systems, make more of everything basically in India using tech transfer agreements, using public-private partnerships with foreign companies and so on. Right. So that is, I feel like, where I come from and where I find the future to be going towards.
Thank you for that.
Is there any other questions that you would like to ask each other? And if not, I will open the floor to the audience as well. And we actually already have one question from the audience too.
Yes, I think we should go to the audience because I know I can ask a lot of questions, but I think we should give audience the option.
I think speaking towards that, there's one question for you, Chuck, from our audience, from Akarsh. We have a question where he has mentioned that web development saw a major shift when HTML became the standard, allowing websites to work across different browsers and platforms. Do you think that AI frameworks will undergo a similar evolution forward, a universal standard? Yes. Benefits? So that's the question that's out there from Akarsh.
That, yes, I think I did address that. It will take time because I think with deregulation, right now we're still in the innovation phase. There will be a lot of consolidation or collaboration that will happen, and there will be some protocols. I think there is some discussion on inference similarities because right now there's a lot of proprietary, a lot of open source. So it will take some time, not anytime soon, but it will get there.
Thank you so much. Just 1 minute. Sorry, Heramb
Uh,
was.
yes, I was unable to unmute. Thank you so much for helping. But I think it just seems right now like we're also in a phase where companies want to one up each other. They're all like, have this kind of dream or this kind of idea that we will reach AGI and will be able to automate as Sam Altman likes to put it, a good chunk of the productive human activities that contribute to the world's GDP. So it also DeepSeek was, uses a lot of reinforcement learning on GPT-4o outputs, right? So it seems to me, at least for some time, we'll be in this phase where, people will keep throwing compute at the problem, but now people will also keep um, having AI models which learn off of other people's AI models, if that is a possibility. And that might lead to problems. It also feels like there are certain forum created for interoperability and talking about that. Um, I think there were calls for that at the IGF recently to have more interoperability in terms of AI standards because we are seeing so much fragmentation between how the EU treats things, how the US treats things, how other countries treat things. And there's also like inter companies coming together. So there are things like the Frontier Model Forum, where companies would supposedly, collaborate and work together to make standards. But yeah, this is also the kind of same idea which translated into the international network of AISIs, right? Like we would all work together to create these evaluation benchmarks and these thresholds, and there'll be like a nice relative interoperability, or at least like there'll be open source tools. But I'm not sure how far that willingness goes because it seems like when these leaders come to these summits, they're like, hey, we want to work with you. And then actually what they're all thinking in their mind is how can we beat each other and one up each other just like the companies are. But yeah, I see there's another question, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I see this other question, and I'm gonna ask it. It's also from Akarsh. His question is talking about Sam Altman. He had mentioned when asked if they are competing with DeepSeek, and he mentions he would want to work with them. There's often a narrative of competition between the US and China in AI. Do you see any areas where collaboration is more likely or beneficial to anyone? That's a great question.
I think I can take that because a lot of times with this, like Heramb was saying, these leaders, they talk and they say, but at the grassroots, right, they're all reading the same AI papers. They're all understanding each other. So OpenAI, everybody knows what exactly the innovations that DeepSeek, they're writing papers. So there is a lot of innovation that came out, and there's a lot of collaboration, not like at a political government level, but there is a lot of exchange that is happening because every time a paper comes, there are like hundreds of papers coming like in a month on new research is coming up. So they're just implementing it. I mean, the pace of innovation is so fast. It's not like the official collaboration may never happen because uh, there is a posturing, political posturing that goes on. That is, they can't openly start a fund with like they did with SoftBank, with some but there is happening. It's happening at the grassroots.
Would anyone else like to add anything to that? Like Heramb, do you have anything else to add, or Nakshatra?
Yes, I'm not sure if like what is more beneficial and what is not. My first answer was going to be we should collaborate on safety endeavors, but there's also issues in terms of antitrust regulations. There needs to be some sort of safety harbor created so that these companies can work together on that also. I think what's happening is also because DeepSeek had an open source model and OpenAI has like there's so much criticism now. Sam Altman said that we might consider open sourcing fast versions of GPT now. So there might be like external, market forces which change the behavior of uh, either company. I'm not sure if like open sourcing highly capable models is good or not, because it also enables like bad actors to come in and easily fine tune models and do whatever they want with them. Um, but yeah, that is a great question.
So, thank you so much, Heram. I think we are almost running out of time, but I know most possibly Rohana might have a question, and I have one last one, so we might go over a few more minutes. If everyone is okay with that, please stay on. Otherwise, um, thank you for joining and participating. But Rohana, do you have a burning question?
Well, I guess for me, like the burning question is there were such great, wonderful insights that have like happened and everything, with like DeepSeek, OpenAI, and I guess I want to pull the lens a little bit to the global south also, and I guess like discuss more like towards a little bit of a broader question to be like, where does all these developments lead for the global south countries, right? Like are like is opportunity going to arise, like what's going to happen, are there going to be some sort of like China kind of has their own regulation system, US is kind of having their own like each country. So do you think this would provide an opportunity for global south to like develop more and have their own form of global framework in AI? So like that's kind of my question that I'm leaving it up to anyone to answer.
I can take that because I think more than regulations and rules and all of that, I think what's going to happen is innovation at grassroots. For example, uh, imagine a small innovator in a little country in India. All he needs is a little laptop, like a Raspberry Pi or something like that, and with a motor and an accentuator, right? And now he can really create something tangible, right? He's not, and then he can probably operate a pump, right? Operate something. So little things like that. Those things will spring up everywhere, I think, because once even little entrepreneurs from little schools, because there's so many STEM graduates, they want to be entrepreneurs, and there's so much make in India, look, nation first kind of concept. So these little things will come so fast, so long, and these people will be talking about regulation frameworks and all of that, but that I think will outpace this one. So we'll be in for a long time before we have any kind of a real framework and real policy.
Thank
And
you
that's
so
my
much,
take.
Chuck. If anyone else wants to add on Heramb, Nakshatra.
No, Heramb, you can go first. You put the hand up first.
Thank you. I'll just take it. Um, I think there are a lot of global south countries that are doing good work in AI policy. Um, just to name a few, I think Saudi Arabia recently put out like a report on deep fakes and how to identify deep fakes and so on and so forth. I think a lot of the ASEAN countries have really good work. I think as a bloc, the global south needs to build those south-south cooperation things. We need to be cognizant of the fact that there are weaker institutions in our countries, so verification mechanisms and so on. It's really hard to do that. So setting up AI safety institutes is really hard for a lot of under-resourced countries. And in those cases, things like regional AI safety institutes might be a good way to build inclusivity, get everyone's opinions together, and contextualize some of these risks. Sometimes there's issues in the global south that are seen as this is the global north audience is not aware of them. And global south citizens are the best people to go ahead and solve that, because just like LLMs, we need context as human beings. Um, so yeah, I think there's a lot of potential for South-South cooperation. There's a lot of potential for things like the Group of 77 to work together as a bloc at the UN to have their voices heard, their concerns heard, and they have been successful in the past in things like at the regarding patents on drugs, regarding the World Trade Organization and UNCTAD, and having effective lobbying done. The global South countries have managed to pull things together, but it is really important to be aware of what kind of risks there are, do a proper risk mapping, horizon scanning analysis, and then come back with what holes there are relative to the global north model. And you cannot just copy paste and keep referring to the EU AI Act blindly, right? Because even that was developed with a certain context. So yeah, those are my 2 cents. Nakshatra, I'm sorry, go for it.
Please don't apologize. I think you just took the words right out of my mouth. But especially to your last point, I think a lot of the time we look to countries who have delivered on a particular legislation or regulation first, and we don't really consider how much stakeholder involvement that they've had. They don't how much research has been conducted, et cetera, et cetera. And we often take that because they've done it first, they've done it the best, right? And it's the same with any form of superpower. We often blindly trust that they've done all the work behind that particular piece of legislation or framework in adopting that. And I think the global south is kind of guilty of it because they want to align themselves with greater powers to get support. So cultural and contextual influences are really important in that regard for in the global south. I come at it from a very different lens with cybercrime in the global south, and I always compare how the effects of the lack of digital literacy in the global south versus countries in the global north and global majority as well. So I know that AI and adoption and the gap in which we operate between both the global south and north is going to be increasingly difficult if we don't do something about it in the near future.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your wonderful insights. I'm now going to hand it over to Priya. She has a burning question.
I do have a burning question. Thank you all very much for this absolutely incredible past hour. Just learned so much about so many aspects of AI. My burning question, is, there are two different approaches here. There's the USA approach. There is the China approach. Perhaps one could be more market-driven, the other is more state-driven, perhaps. But my concern is really looking at these two different countries, these different approaches. What is the reason for concern for countries to say, like Italy or other European nations, perhaps maybe some global South countries, global majority countries, perhaps banning DeepSeek? What are the concerns that are most prominent, particularly, for instance, from the United States side or from other aspects? Could anybody answer that?
Yeah, I think so regarding DeepSeek or regarding US AI models, concerns that global south countries could have is like just data collection, having a lot of backdoors. Um, it also seems like, you know, a lot of the data is exported from the global south countries, and they are exporting data to, you know, import back intelligence, which seems like a really bad trade in the long term. And in terms of growing internet access and so on, it's the global majority countries which are putting forth a lot of data. Um, yeah, I think those are the main issues. I think the other issue is that it should not be, you know, wiping out of the local innovation ecosystem. So we have been seeing, just like Chuck was mentioning, right? Like a kid in Bangalore now can innovate. Problem is also the fault lines are shifting so rapidly that they don't want a GPT-6 to make their local LLMs obsolete like really quickly and just keep playing catch up. That is another concern. And another like quick third concern which pops up is during COVID we saw how a lot of these countries they hoarded vaccines, and now there's this concern that, you know, they might hoard compute, and we saw to some degree early signs of this with the AI diffusion controls, which came out during the Biden administration. So there are like these kinds of concerns, and global South countries again, you know, need to work together, need to make stopgap measures before these things uh, come into full effect.
Thank you so much, Heramb, for your insight as well. If anyone likes to add anything further. I think we had one question in the chat box from one of our audience as well, which I'd love to address. And I've already seen that Nakshatra has already given a perspective. But just to repeat that question, it's from uh, Jade Mitchell. And basically, the question is in line with Akarsh's perspective, how optimistic are the panelists about the shift from the competition framed by superiority in warfare to collaboration in solving global challenges like renewable energy? Do you believe AI has the potential to unite us just as much as it risks widening disparities? If anyone wants to take that. And if Nakshatra wants to, if you want to reiterate again what you have mentioned in the chat also, that would also be great.
All I'm going to say, it's a great question, because I think a lot of the debate right now is between is AI good or bad? And there's a lot of, so if it's great, then it's going to unite. If it's bad, I think time will tell, Jed. I think it's a very important question. That's on everybody's mind. That's all I can say without knowing the answer.
Something that I have learnt over the course of my career and also being a criminologist is that everything operates in a grey area and there's no binary, which is why I try to not always talk about the negatives of using AI. And something that I'm really positive about is that if we continuously have like solutions that are looking to increase human dignity and justice, and whatever we do is encouraging the betterment of humankind, whatever that is, then we will eventually get there. And it's a very fine balance, but at least we're having the conversations now, because I feel as though there are people that come out with a lot of rhetoric that might align with political agendas and etc. But there are a lot of independent and nonpartisan thinkers out there that are really taking the stage in like global stages. I've been part of a number of conferences in the last couple of weeks where I've been speaking, and people have been very open about their opinions on AI. Which I don't feel has happened with other things related to like digital crimes or policy otherwise. So I know that there are a lot of people working in this space, and hopefully a collective movement towards this goal will help.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. And I'm gonna basically reiterate what my co-panelists have said. I don't have a very satisfying answer to this. But I'm like very cautiously optimistic. Um, and it's in a very wait and watch kind of a way. I think we need to make sure that the things we value as human beings and how we define overall human well-being that remains true, and AI doesn't leach into that. I don't know if you have seen like Wall-E, where the humans just began valuing the fact that AI can bring them endless food and drinks for like, basically their whole lives, and they do nothing. Um, so there are obviously risks. There obviously are also a lot of upsides. It's a lot like other things uh, in the tech space, right? The internet brought forth a lot of risks. It also brought forth a lot of benefits. I think AI is a lot is a little bit more different. It is a lot more different because it has this ability to be hyper personalized and contextualize itself to your liking and really engage you. And um, that might cause like a shifting of all kinds in terms of human values overall. Um, and yeah, I think yeah, AI just has the potential to unite us. There's lots of good innovation happening. There's a fair bit of doom and gloom on the panel, but there's definitely a lot of good work happening in terms of AI for SDGs. You look at the AI for Good program. The IT also did some work around AI for Good. I think a lot of countries have integrated AI very well into making public services more accessible, but we have to be as civil society organizations as active citizenry. We have to watch each step and make sure that they don't cross certain red lines. You don't want mass surveillance tomorrow because it's convenient for crime. So we have to be in this very on the lookout constantly. Unfortunately, AI moves really really quickly, so it makes our job so much more harder. But yeah, that those are my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. What an incredible discussion this was, and with different perspectives from all over the world today, from Taiwan, Australia, the United States. A big thank you to our amazing guests for sharing their expertise and their experiences. Due to time constraints, we weren't able to address all the questions or explore every aspect of the topic. However, the depth and quality of today's discussion was just remarkable. Thank you again to our panelists and to everyone who joined us today. Remember, you can stay connected with Zero Day Dispatch through our website, newsletter, or LinkedIn page and other social media platforms, all of which I've added to our chat. We look forward to continuing these crucial conversations, and we will be posting the video of this discussion on our LinkedIn and other social media channels very soon. So stay tuned for that. And until next time, thank you so very much.